So I want to talk about just how we help to ensure that they're happy campers. And just like Janaea said, I completely agree with so much of what we do, kind of sets the tone and really creates the space for students to have a good time, to feel safe. So I'm going to be talking about that today. I wanted to start off just with a definition of discipline that I'm thinking about and that kind of informs how I do what I do and what I say in terms of work with planning and intervening when behavior is an issue. But I think if we're thinking about it as being something to teach and to help to strengthen or mold, that then we have an opportunity to think, like, what are we going to do in order to ensure that our campers are doing what we're expecting them to do and doing well. So I don't think in terms of like what's the punishment if they don't do what we want them to do, but more so how are we shaping and molding our children. So thinking about that, I thought about, well, what are the differences, and particularly with the cultures that are going to be explored this year, I came across a couple of things. One was a research study that was done in 2006 looking at cultural differences with American students versus Japanese students. And so it was interesting to me that in that research, kids said that a lot of their behavior is kind of defined in the decisions that they make by the fear of punishment. And that kind of is what regulates behavior a lot. And in children in Japan, they didn't mention that fear. And there was an emphasis on their impact on others. So I thought that was really significant and what we want to foster. Also looking at some things that I found from a school system in South Africa, the emphasis again was on creating situations where people are thinking about their impact and what affects others in relationships. So in this case, I just shared a quote where it says, in a positive school situation, a breaking of a school rule is viewed as not only a negative action towards the school, but also a negative action towards fellow learners and teachers and the disruption of mutual relationships. And I think if we're thinking in that way, then we're going to be thinking about how do we foster positive relationships and opportunities for all of the campers. So I appreciated that there were those consistencies, particularly as we're looking at different cultures during camp, but also I think what is consistent from a more Afrocentric point of view is thinking communally and how we're working together. And so one of the things, there's a lot of research related to positive discipline. So one of the things that we want to be thinking about, and I just heard Janaea say about the priorities of safety and having fun and learning. Children really thrive, and so if we're creating an environment where this can happen, where they're feeling a sense of community, where they're feeling a sense of belonging and significance, and also that there's safety, emotional safety as well as physical safety, that they're going to have a great time throughout camp. Of course, there's exceptions to rules, my child being one, where we can do all of those things, and she is very uncomfortable in new situations, and so there's times where we would do something different, still keeping these things in mind. There's also going to be kids who we're going to establish some rules, and they're going to do things that kind of go around those rules, still keeping these things in mind. The approach might be a little bit different, and we'll talk about that. So in terms of building a sense of community, I just wanted to share some ideas about what that might look like. And for many of you, it might be a review, some things that you've done in previous summers, but I just wanted to make sure to share some examples. So for building a sense of community, it could be something like naming the group. It could be something that ensuring that there's activities that include everyone's contribution and participation. Definitely working toward the Friday presentations do that. Just keeping in mind that we want to make sure everybody's feeling a part of those activities. And then, of course, moving together as a group, which happens naturally. But those are ways to build a sense of community. If there's a special activity that they're doing, just making sure that people are checking in with each other so that everybody's there. That is a way to promote feelings of belonging and significance, that each person in the group has relevance and purpose for being there and is important to being there. And I think for some kids it's harder, like particularly if they're only there for a week, to really have an opportunity to get to know them and to build that. So even if it's doing activities in the morning where it's making sure everybody says at least one or two other campers' names so that they're getting to know each other. If it's playing games and they're in partners or trios, again, making sure they know each other's names and just feeling connected in that way. And then, of course, acknowledging contributions and using kids' names. Oh, that was so fantastic when you came in and did, you know, whatever, to get us started. So just ways that they're feeling like they're known is really an important piece and that they belong. And in terms of feeling that there's feelings of safety, that campers, they know what to expect as much as possible, that they maintain, that you maintain a calm and even tone, and Janae was talking about that. So as upbeat as we can be and as positive we can be, that's going to be very helpful for all the kids. Also acknowledging positive and desired behaviors and checking in, some things that I was just saying, just to make sure that they're feeling like, okay, I'm good, we're having a good time, or if they're needing additional support, then you can kind of know how to gauge what you do in order to provide that for them. One of the things that we'll talk about, and there's a handout that says management strategies that we'll look at in just a moment, but want to point out, just like if we're thinking about the rules, that they are specific, clear, that directions are giving in really clear ways, that they're simple rules to follow, and that we're focusing on what we want our campers to do and not what we don't want them to do. So when we're thinking about an activity, if somebody is moving you know, kind of all over the room, but everybody's supposed to be seated, then to talk about it's so great that everybody has come, or almost everybody has come to sit down in a circle, we're ready to get started. We need so-and-so to also sit down, but to focus on what they should be doing. But keeping rules simple, ensuring that the objectives of activities are consistent with campers' need developmentally, and we're going to talk about that in terms of what's expected at different age ranges. Also keeping in mind their attention span, their need to move around, that kind of thing. And again, doing things that promote a sense of community, providing feedback that's positive. And then I listed some things for campers who maybe their compliance or their behavior is less consistent and less consistent with what we're expecting them to do. And it's even more important to keep it simple, to be direct, to focus on what they should start doing instead of just like, you know, stop moving around or stop tapping your pencil or stop whatever it is, but focus on what they should be doing. And my proximity is probably very important and useful, not probably, is important and useful. So to be close to a camper when you're talking to them if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but to getting, you know, close, a neutral tone, calm voice. Give wait time. Sometimes campers need choices. I know that's true in school, that some kids have a harder time with one thing, like it another way, or sometimes like to do things in a different order, and that it's okay for that to happen. So again, providing choices, and to anticipate any difficulties, because even after a day, you might get a sense that the way certain things are done might not work for a certain camper, and so then to anticipate that and maybe to provide more modeling or to provide more specific direction so that you're just helping to meet all the kids' needs. So I wanted, the second handout is a chart that says characteristics by age range. So it's kind of for us to think about what can we expect for a 4-year-old that looks really different than an 8-year-old. How long should it take to complete an activity, or how much time can they sustain their attention? Humor is a big thing, and I know this is the case with teachers in schools. Paying attention to kind of where the kids are is really important, because for the younger kids, they don't get a lot of the kind of sarcasm or adult humor, and so paying attention to that will be really important as well. So for 3 to 5-year-olds, to be thinking that they love physical activity, love to move, and so you'll probably notice that the lessons are going to be inclusive of a lot of opportunities to move around, that they're friendly, they're talkative, they're cooperative, that they want to help, And so even to have little jobs to ask students to get materials or to be in charge of putting something away, but so that they're, again, feeling, one, they're belonging, that they're significant, and that they are doing something that contributes to the betterment of the whole group. Younger ones are also pretty demanding in terms of their needs and needing attention right away, not like a little bit later or after, you know, something else happens. So I know for those who work with the younger kids, that I know you know that to be true. And also they have a harder time seeing things from another's point of view. So even when it's very important to talk about things like help them make a connection. How would you feel if, or what do you think would happen to you if, so that they're then in the mindset of, oh, I wouldn't like that if somebody took the pencil away from me, or I would like that if somebody smiled and invited me to sit down next to them. So that then they're thinking, oh, okay, I can do that for somebody else. They won't automatically be thinking that way. With the 6 to 8 year olds, they're more likely to work quickly and want to just get things done. Their attention span's longer, of course, but they're still ready for activities. It's summertime. They're wanting the fun stuff. And so if there are things that they're feeling less engaged with, it might just require changing it up a little bit, taking a break and coming back to it. They're, at this age, more concerned about the friendships and more concerned about what's happening with other students or with other campers, and so to even be thinking about ways to foster that so that they're paying attention to their friends. With the younger kids, they may, of course, be engaged with other kids, but with the real little ones, from day to day, they might be playing with the whole group, whereas with the older, you might see them start to make closer connections more quickly, and that's significant for them. But they're imaginative, cooperative, and also more able to reflect on their learning and to think more about what is happening. So for the lessons, particularly with South Africa or Native Americans, they may have already learned things about apartheid or about things that have happened with Native Americans, but they're going to have a sense about what justice is in a way that's different than the 3 to 5s. And in a way that they're going to be able to think, like, is this fair, not fair? So to be reflective in that way. With the 9 to 12 year olds, still cooperative, more competitive. Even with the younger ones, sometimes being first is really important, but at this age, if they're have that kind of more competitive, they have that more competitive nature, they're going to be, about being first. And so that might come up. And just to remember that appropriate for their age range, but a reminder that, like, first isn't the most important thing, or we're working together, or what's more important is did you have fun in the process, or what the end product looks like if it's about the presentation on Friday. So just to be thinking about that. Again, they can still misunderstand adult sarcasm, might take it as criticism, and so important to just be thinking kind of for where they are age-wise in their understanding. They're going to be more able to give feedback about that, though, or just have a reaction that you're gonna sense that they didn't get it. Whereas the younger kids, it just might completely overhead. Even compared to the 6 to 8 year olds, there's a greater sense of right and wrong, and so there's an opportunity to really maybe look at issues around social justice in a more specific way, even than with the younger kids. So the third handout is one that if you want to do some specific things with the campers in the group, like on Mondays, to talk about, well, what are our rules for our group, and let's have some agreements about those. This is just an example of a way to do it. It could be on a chart. It could be that they're already posted, but you want to just talk about them. An important piece is then, what do the rules look like in the classroom? What do the rules look like when we go to cooking? What do the rules look like when we're in the lunch room? So thinking about in all settings, what are the possibilities? And it's important to talk about those so that we're really teaching the campers what we're expecting, as opposed to just assuming that they're fine. They're going to know to keep their hands and feet to themselves, or that they're going to know that what being respectful means in each situation. So really important to give examples. to be specific, to use the positives. I know a lot of times when I've done activities with kids, they'll start making a list of what you can't do. There's no running, there's no hitting, there's no yelling, we want to talk about what they should be doing. So it's, if it's being respectful means raising your hand, then the example in the classroom for being respectful would be raising your hand. So be really explicit about them. What's it look like? What are you supposed to do? And also to include the rationale for things, like if there's a question about, well, why do we have to do it this way and not that way? Important to talk about, so that they're also feeling a sense of like, why is this important to me? Why would it be that I'm going to engage in this way? Because for some kids, if they see it in a very different way, they might have a very different idea about how to do something. Things to keep in mind and examples that might be useful are, so I included like be safe. It could be that the example, if you were filling this out, under, like one thing might be responsible, and so maybe the things are that you're sharing your materials, that if you have a job for the week, that you're doing your job, that you're helping to clean up. That might be the things that are what it looks like in the classroom. Or in the common areas, that maybe it's walking in the hallways, that help clean up after lunch, or follow directions from all adults. So here I just included some others in terms of being safe, like if that were another rule that were listed, then maybe in class would be keeping hands and feet to self. In common areas, walk calmly, use an inside voice when inside. Be respectful could be sharing materials. Some of them, kind of, and I think that where it might fit for being respectful, being responsible, if that's a rule that like following directions, some might say, well, that's just being respectful. It's okay if that's there as the example, and it's okay if it's there for being responsible. So I started to talk about this a little bit, but for those who might have more difficulty following a rule and breaking a rule, that we think about consequences that are related to the behavior that has occurred, that they're true for everyone, so that we're being consistent, that we're not shaming anyone or calling anybody out, saying, like you've done this, this, and this, and you need to sit over here. So doing things that aren't calling attention to an individual in a way that makes them feel ashamed. And focusing on what the problem is and how to resolve it, not just what who the person is. So thinking about consequences, we can think of natural consequences that occur or logical consequences that occur. And one example here, anybody can call out an answer. The natural consequence of dropping snack on the floor is or might be?
You just don't eat it.
You don't get your snack. Yeah. So that would be a natural consequence. Going outside without your coat on in the cold, you're going to be cold. So that's just kind of the thing that follows naturally from whatever the action, the behavior was. We probably will use more logical consequences, and that is what we're setting up and saying, like, here's what's going to happen if something goes wrong or there's a problem related to breaking a rule. And so an example here, the logical consequence for pushing in line is, what might you do? Somebody might get hurt as a natural consequence. The getting hurt might be a natural consequence, but the logical consequence would actually be what we would do in response, or have the child do.
Apologize and stand in the back of the line.
Yeah, so apologizing and standing in the back of the line may be the logical consequence. Like you were pushing to get in front. Our rule is to be respectful and so an example of that is keeping our hands and feet to ourselves. And so, yeah, you're going to apologize and stand in the back. So just as a reminder to share responsibilities with others, I know that at least from what I have seen, it can get challenging at times. You're busy, you're doing activities with the kids. There's a lot of campers who want your attention right away. So just sharing the responsibilities with the other adults that you're in the room with, staying positive, being as consistent as possible, keeping opportunities for fun. I'll add safety and learning at the forefront, ensuring that each day is a fresh start. So if there's a camper who maybe did do something that was a violation of a rule or very disappointing behavior or whatever happened the day before, letting them know it's a fresh start, it's a great new day, we're excited for you to be here. But so whatever words that are encouraging and inviting the child back in. And of course get help when needed. I know that there may be, well, I don't know for sure, but there may be circumstances where there are children that have more significant behavioral needs. And so I think that's a point where you would consult with Janaea for sure and make sure that that child is getting the support that they need. If a student, I can't imagine this would happen, but if there's somebody who's being aggressive toward another student, time to get Janaea for sure. So not everything needs to be just handled in the classroom or, you know, kept within the confines of the room, because we're thinking about everybody feeling safe and being responsible for all the kids. So consulting with Janaea as often as needed. And then that was it.